Hello, listeners. My name is Raj Singhal, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Investment Stereotypes. This episode is brought to you by Multipie.co, where we believe that investing is an ignored life skill. Our mission is to create a platform where people can come, learn, share, and collaborate through the right tools. Ultimately, we want your hard earned money to work for you. Here at Breaking Investment Stereotypes, my job is to deconstruct world class investors, wealth managers, or business builders and deep dive into their journey professionally, personally, or both. I want to give a little guidance on how to use the shows. None of the following should be taken as investment advice. Please see multiply.co/disclosures for more information. My guest for today is Yashish Dahiya. Yashish is the co-founder and group CEO of Policybazaar.com. In over 12 years, Yashish has grown Policybazaar to become a key influencer in consumer decisions around insurance. He believes death, disease, and disability products are the future of the insurance industry as India strives towards social security. He is an avid sportsman, has worked in the past as MD of Ebookers Plc and consultant with Bain Company in their London office. So, without further ado, please welcome Yashish. Hey, Yashish, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah. So Yashish, let me first start with your story. I heard that you actually got into tuitions post your IITIM before building few companies. So please take us through your career and how you got into building Policy Bazaar.
Yeah. So sure. So we used to live in Noida, and after my IIT and IIM, I got a job with a company, and the initial salary for the first year was about 13,000 rupees per month. And I I was wondering, my father did not earn so much. He was in the army. Uh, I just retired from the army, but I somehow thought I could make more money than 13,000 on my own, and it wasn't making sense, going to a different city and working for a company just wasn't adding up because I could see the expenses, right? I'd have to stay somewhere, I'd have to kind of put it all together, and it wasn't making sense. So I started a tuition class in my house during the holidays. You get a bit of a holiday, 2 3 months holiday, and I started making good money out of that, about 2 to 3 times more than the salary I would have received. And I had no expenditures in the sense I used to work from the dining table of our house, and it was working out quite okay for me. But I think my parents did not like that. They thought it was not a respectable job or something, and they wanted me to be in a job. So they asked me to join a job, and I did join that company. I stayed with them for 4 years. I did well with them. Um, and I think there's an important piece there because if you think about it, it was not financially rewarding. It was not a job I enjoyed. But at the same time, as I look back, I did very well with them. And I was totally focused and committed to the fact that I was there. And a lot of people ask me why I did that. And to me, the important part was once I'm there, it's my reputation on the line, right? It doesn't matter what I'm getting paid. It doesn't matter whether I like doing what I do or not. The fact is that I've turned up. If I've turned up, I have to do the job as well as I can. And so I don't think you always need passion. You just need to get on with it. Anyway, the rest of the story is quite clear. After that, I joined Bain for some time, and then I was at Ebookers. I grew quite rapidly at Ebookers, became the managing director, and post Ebookers, we started Policy Bazaar, which has thankfully done quite well.
Yeah. So I guess we all started our career around the similar time because I remember when I started my own job with DSP Merrill, the salary was definitely lower than what you were getting at 13,000. So those were the times. So Yashish, while many would know, and Policy Bazaar has been quite there in the media as well. Can you please explain in your words what Policy Bazaar does and how the company generates its revenue?
Sure. So, people buy a lot of insurance in the market, and it is mostly sold by either a physical agent or a bank or somebody. But most of the time, when you're buying an insurance policy, you are dealing with one company's product, one set of products, and so your information becomes quite limited. What Policy Bazaar set out to do was make that information available to you across multiple companies. But the more important aspect in our view was that the wrong kind of, let me not say that, the right kind of products were not being sold sufficiently. What are the right kind of products? Insurance is required for health insurance, life insurance. And when I say life insurance, I mean term insurance. I don't mean investments or savings primarily, because the most critical part is that if the earning member disappears, then costs need to be taken care of. And so we popularized these quite a bit. And that was the clear focus, that can we move the focus towards protection, because insurance is about protection. Insurance is not about making money. Insurance is about what if things go wrong. And we focused on that. And, obviously, the second part about insurance, which is very critical, which people sometimes forget, because a lot of customers ask us that why is it so difficult to buy an insurance policy? It is difficult because in insurance, you can pay 1,000 rupees and take away 1 crore rupees very quickly. And so due diligence has to happen. And due diligence has to happen on the consumer also. It's not like it's my right to buy this shoe. Why can't I get this shoe? No, sometimes insurance will be denied. And the reason it will be denied is because basis the declarations, there isn't comfort in the person who's taking on. So the insurance is a complicated product. And I think we are starting to bring that understanding to the entire market, that this is not about selling, a pair of jeans or a pair of shoes, which everybody in the world has a right to buy, or even an airline ticket. This is actually about risk assessment and absolute bona fide declarations and decisions made on the basis of those declarations. And those declarations are critical. And the customers hence need to be educated to understand those declarations and understand the products. So I think we're kind of leading a revolution, which is towards educating both the consumer and the industry on insurance as it should be. So yeah, it's an interesting activity.
Okay. So, just building on that, how, for our listeners, can you tell us how different you are from the traditional insurance company, and many of which are listed on the exchange as well? I guess you guys more into aggregating the insurance, but please.
So I'll explain a few facts to you.
Yeah.
If you look at the industry, and I don't say that is good, bad, ugly, whatever. The point is, if you look at the industry, 85% of the products sold in the industry are either savings products with some minimal component of insurance cover to basically provide some tax benefit, or they are motor insurance. And a small fraction of the industry is then health insurance. And an even smaller fraction is what you would call term insurance or protection, absolute protection, right? The moment you look at us and what the customers buy through us, you would find the protection products would be 70% of what people buy through us. And only, about 15% are the savings products. So why does this change happen? Why does this huge difference happen that the industry is 85% savings products, whereas we are only 15% savings products? Do we believe that the products are very complicated? Not really. Health insurance is more complicated than most investment products in India. And health insurance is our biggest product. While it is quite, it's not as big in the... So I think, I would say we sell what the consumers ask for, what the educated customer asks for. Let me put it another way. The customer is passive in most of the industry. The customer is the taker. He's sitting there, somebody approaches him and says, I think you should have this product, right? And the seller is in power. The seller could be the insurance company or the distributor. Whereas in our case, the customer gets up in the morning and says, hey, I want this product. Can you tell me what my options are? And so it just, the consumer demand is for term insurance, health insurance, again, based on education. I guess that's where it really starts, and that's where that's the the boil point of Policybazaar.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I think you also alluded to that. I mean, insurance is still very under-penetrated in India. I mean, I think you mentioned in one of some earlier calls or talks that about, there are about 60 million Indian families which has got about more than 5 lakh of annual income. But the insurance penetration is still probably around, say, 20%. And even during
Yes.
COVID, but only about 7 to 10% of the people who reached the hospital had any decent medical policy. So how do you think you guys are looking to change that? How that can be changed?
So let me explain that in a very pragmatic manner. I just explained to you that 80% of the policy premium collected in the industry is for savings products.
Yeah.
During COVID, that can also help. It's like taking your money and paying the hospital because that savings are there, right? However, what will really help is health insurance. Or if somebody expires, what will really help their family in a dramatic manner is term insurance. I just explained that for the industry, both of those products put together are less than 12-13% of the industry. For us, 70% of what we sell is just those products. So obviously, we have a higher focus on selling those products vis-a-vis the other products. Let's take a customer who, because somebody will say there is an insurance component there also. So let me actually explain it a bit. You have a customer who earns 5 lakh rupees income a year. He wants to buy protection through a savings product because that's what everybody says should be done. That buy, an insurance policy and you'll get protection. What protection should he have? I think any normal person would agree he needs about 50 lakh rupees of protection, about 10 years of income, broadly, for his family, because, maybe young family, etc., about 10 years of income. Now, if he wants to buy a 50 lakh rupee sum assured, if you look at most savings products, he can only buy, he usually will have to buy about 10 times premium, will be the sum assured. So he'll have to invest about 5 lakh rupees per year to buy that policy. So it's impractical. You can never build a protection base out of a savings product, at least during your working timeline. Maybe for pensions it works. It works for pensions. You can build a pension base through savings, but you can't build a protection against death through a savings product. You fundamentally cannot. I've just proven that to you. The business of insurance is actually a hard business. It's a very hard business. You have to assess. It's about when things really go wrong.
So, we read that Policybazaar commands about 25% market share in life insurance policies, processing, and understand you probably process about 1 in every 2 term insurance products sold digitally. I mean, which is very fascinating. I mean, just the sheer numbers. What does Policybazaar do differently to achieve all this?
I was speaking to a friend recently and we were discussing an opportunity. And in that half an hour of conversation, every time he would come at it from how much money was available, how much investment could come in, how much valuation could be created. And every time in the half an hour that we were having a conversation, I was coming at it from what is the problem to be solved? Is it a big enough problem to be solved? That is where the answer lies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think we are solving a very fundamental problem. And we are very focused on that. Almost everybody else I have met in the system who wants to do this starts off with, oh, there's a distribution pie of $5 billion a year. What pie can we have out of it? The industry, without understanding that distribution pie exists because different products are sold. That pie will go down when very consumer-centric products are sold. The consumers who need these complex products are not, you cannot provide convenience. You cannot. Because if you provide convenience, you work against the industry and against the consumer. Because let me give you an example, right? I say, okay, everybody can come and buy insurance, no problem, no questions asked. What does that do? The people who know they are going to die in the next 3 months, they will come and buy the insurance, which is okay, good, let's do that for charity, no problem. Who actually pays for it? The other customers.
Yep.
So eventually increase the cost of it for everyone. So that's not the way you can do it. It's a hard product, it's a hard conversation. And I don't think people understand that. I think they understand it, but I don't think that's the I haven't come across another person in my life who is as passionate about solving that problem.
Okay. I mean, and insurance traditionally been a very slow moving industry as well, right? I mean, whatever metrics we use.
We've been at it. We are in our 14th year right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a long journey, right? So,
Yeah.
and then of course, there are challenges, and you guys must have faced that. Do you want to talk few of those challenges? How have you navigated that? I mean, this whole thinking around
See,
looking at the problem. Yeah, go ahead.
we are very grateful that while there were challenges, we are very grateful for the opportunities. See, if the regulator had not given us an opportunity to sell insurance, we can talk endlessly about the challenge, that we had from a regulatory perspective. But I think the regulator did us a huge favor by creating something called a web aggregator guidelines, web aggregator regulations, then allowing us to finally become a broker again. So I think it takes a bit of time. Somebody said this to me long back. It said, don't worry about the problems. If you're doing the right thing, then the regulator, everybody else will come back to help you eventually. And we can't expect everybody to understand what we are trying to do. And even I would have issues tomorrow if somebody, let us say, if the government came in and just said, okay, we are giving insurance to everybody for free. I would also not feel very good about it, despite the fact that we're solving my problem. Personally, I would feel good about it, because I think the mission we set out to do would be done, and that's fantastic. But I'm just saying, as a rational person, I should also not feel happy about it, despite the fact that it's serving my purpose. Right? So I think people will always have their own, agendas. Sometimes we have to. My only message to anybody is, see if your agenda is very small, or are you actually being a leader? Are you actually being the change agent, or are you being the blocker? Because if you're just being the blocker, it's quite sad. It's just a sad way to live. It's a sad way to, and eventually, death will come.
Yeah.
You can't block change.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but do the right thing. And there are a few people in the industry who've always done the right thing. So I think, you eventually get enough of those people, and you finally sail through.
Just you mentioned that this is 14th year for you guys, and just want to pick on that. I mean, it's a long journey, and in early stages, I'm sure there would have been ups and downs. And I'm doing my own startup, and I can see that. I mean, for me, it's very early right now. When was the point when you actually thought, we passed the inflection point?
So I was joking with my co-founders recently. When we started, 200 days in a year were spent like khadam, all over, right? And about 30 days were spent feeling we are on top of the world, right? That ratio now has probably reversed, right? And when did it become equal? Maybe about 5-6 years ago. So we've been about 14 years at it. And that ratio has, every year we feel the number of days when we feel we are going to die are fewer. And the number of days when we feel we're on top of the world are increasing. And that's how you have to take it. You take it I realized this about a couple of years into our venture, that you don't make your decisions basis today. You make your decisions basis how the last 90 days have been. And how many of those 90 days did you feel on top of the world? And how many of those 90 days did you feel like you were going to die? And that is how you should make your decisions, because otherwise, yeah, the ups and downs are very, very volatile in a startup.
Yeah. Is that 5 years is you must have seen other startups as well, and you've been involved in a couple of the companies. Is that 5 year you see where generally the inflection points are, or people have different stages in their own?
I think, okay, so 2 points. One, when did we start knowing this was going to work? And this is going to sound very, very strange to you. The answer is on day one.
Okay, that's good.
We genuinely knew. I have done businesses in the past. I was never confident they would work.
Mm-hmm.
This one we knew would work. And the reason we knew that was because we had no option to fail. We were at the end of everything, right? I was at the end of my bank balances. I had left my family. I was in a different country. There was no option to fail. This failing here would have meant there is no way to hide, right? And I think that usually creates the chance that you don't fail. Where you kind of effectively you burnt all your other bridges, right? I think also depends on what you've given up to get there. Like, you've given up a steady job, you've given up, your normal family life, etc., etc. I think when do investors en masse start believing this is really going to work, and 90 out of 100 people you talk to say want to invest with you, etc., etc. That for us happened about 5 years in, because before that, whether people were investing as VCs or funds or whatever, they were effectively all angels. They all had to believe in the management. So I think when InfoEdge invested, when Intel invested, when Inventus invested, till then there were very few investors ready to invest. 1 to 3 investors in every round. After that, in every round, it was like, okay, which of these investors will add most value to us? So which one do we take? And there were like always 6 to 10 investors ready. And I think that's what tells you that you've kind of reached a stage where you're choosing rather than, relying on the goodwill of a few.
Yeah. So you mentioned about InfoEdge, and I just want to spend a little bit of time on that about InfoEdge and Sanjeev Bukchandani. They're another company which is going through the IPO right now. Probably that company is also probably done about 10 years or so. And they were probably, you said, right, they were the early investors in your company. Anything? Do you want to talk about them? I mean, initial years are always
they are very, very good. They are extremely good. They are consistent. They don't sway with the times. They're extremely consistent. Remember, they invested in us when fintech wasn't a word.
Yep.
They invested in Zomato when food tech wasn't even, like, nobody thought about food tech, right?
Yep.
See, Zomato is, by the way, it's a 2008, 2009 kind of company. It's actually about 13 years old. When I talk to all the Deliveroo's and the other guys here in the UK, they were not even born, right? So it's way, way ahead of what you would call food tech. So I don't know how they invest. They've also had their own set of failures, but they are quite a fundamental thinker, and they don't change. So one thing I have noticed is many investors change their view every quarter. And I've seen that with the best of investors. They change their view every quarter. InfoEdge, that doesn't happen. They are, very fundamental believers in, in people and in companies. Of course, the companies have to deliver. They can cut off from a company after some time. They may refuse to invest further, but they sometimes are supportive. So in our first 3 rounds, after the first round, InfoEdge was not happy with our performance or our industry or whatever. There were a lot of concerns they had, but they still supported us by co-investing smaller amounts, like but they still supported us. And then when the crazy time started, when everybody wanted to invest, let's say 2012 onwards, that time they sold because they were consistent with their view that this is a company uh, which has got huge amount of regulatory side issues and all that stuff. So they started selling. I think uh, at some point we're extremely grateful. Let me just put it that way.
Yep. Okay. So let's move back to the insurance. And I think you mentioned, I mean, insurance is a very distributor-driven product, right? I mean, probably no one earlier cared about the consumers. It was always about how distributors and insurers were making money. Of course, you guys are doing a great job, and you touched upon some of those, in our conversation. So, what change in the consumer mindsets do you believe has made this possible to shift from human brokers and agents to platform?
No, I think, look, human brokers are a good thing. I'm not saying they're a bad thing. In fact, we ourselves are starting to have offline presence.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not knock the wrong thing. I think consumer understanding was very weak. They didn't know what was good for them. Let me put it this way. Almost nobody bought term insurance till 2008, 2009. So a lot of education was required. We've spent thousands of crores of rupees educating the consumer on which insurance is right for them, why it is right for them, etc., etc. And a lot of the parts in the industry did not have any interest in educating the consumer on those facets. But with all that education that's happened, the consumer is rational, right? It's a fairly, it's a fairly rational thing that people need health insurance and life insurance. So they started getting it, and they started looking for it, and they started buying. And I think as the future evolves, more and more of them will buy. Okay. Because it's a necessity, right? So today the middle class cannot afford Medicare without insurance, because today it costs 25 to 50,000 rupees per day at most big hospitals in the country, unless you're going to a government hospital or something. But today, if you're going to a Medanta, Fortis, whichever one, is 25 to 50,000 rupees per day. Now, which middle class person can afford to pay that for even 1 week? Right? 1 week is a few lakhs down already.
Yeah.
So I think the Indian healthcare infrastructure is built for the rich, not for the middle class. And thus the middle class needs the support of insurance to be able to tide through tough times. Also, the middle class nuclear families cannot afford death. I don't know why people don't get it. You cannot afford death. Death is a very, very expensive thing. Death of an earning member, how will those children keep going to the same schools? How will the rents get paid? How will the mortgages get paid? How does it happen without a severe deterioration in quality of life? So these are necessities, which people have to buy before they start saving. But I think people are starting to understand that slowly. It's difficult, right? Because you just pay a few thousand rupees every month and get nothing. The best case scenario in insurance policy is you never use it.
Yep.
And then people will feel like they're wasting money. They're not wasting money. They are making sure that out of 100 people, whoever, how insurance started, right? In the villages, somebody is animal would die. Because animals have to die, right? Everybody's animal cannot live forever. Somebody would get a disease, somebody would get something. Let's say cows in India. And cow or buffalo was the primary source of earning because they would do the farming, they would do everything. And whoever's cow or buffalo died then had a massive hit on their income for the next few years. And so what the village people decided is that, guys, everybody puts in, 20 rupees per month or whatever. And we just keep putting that in. And whoever's cow dies will get a new cow without having to bother. So the pain is distributed amongst everybody. Now, nobody knows if my cow is going to die or somebody else's cow is going to die. But yes, cows will die every year. That we know. Because if people feel they don't fall sick, they will just go to a hospital and see. There are young people just like them sitting in those hospitals. I was playing basketball with a friend of mine. Half an hour later, he was in hospital. He was 10 years younger to me. Half an hour later, he was in hospital. Within the next 24 hours, the bill was 1.5 lakhs.
Wow.
I know because it was my credit card. I had put my credit card. He didn't have money to pay that time. Right? And he took about 6 months to repay me that money. But the point is, these things are happening all the time. Now, if somebody can't see it, we are trying to educate them to see it. It's not about fear mongering. It's about a reality check.
Yeah.
So I think that mindset is changing definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, in over all these years, you've been running Policybazaar. What are the trends you guys are seeing right now in this whole insurance sector? I mean, I'm sure
The insurance industry is headed towards protection, without a shadow of doubt. Anybody who misses this trend is at their own peril, because according to me, within 10 years, protection will pretty much be the only part of the industry. And the rest will become very sidelined, very marginalized. Right? Because the consumer interest lies in protection. I think the second part is customer access is key, because the customer does not come to you on his own or her own. You have a very, very difficult time, because almost all the margins are going to be taken by the person who has the customer access. And I think that's obvious, because one can sell company A versus company B versus company C versus company D. It doesn't matter which company. So I think customer access is very important. So direct to consumer, building a direct to consumer is very critical for everyone. I think claims will get automated. I have zero doubt there. Within 2 to 3 years, we will see significant amounts of claim automation. And a lot of the AI would be used there. And that is when the industry would grow 2-3x again. Because with claims automation will come confidence in transacting with the industry. I think those are the couple of things that I think data will be obvious. Well, it's an obvious one, right? The data will be used more and more.
Have you seen COVID accelerating the adoption here for the insurance?
COVID is going to be. COVID has made it mainstream. COVID has made the conversation of health and death one that exists in every house. Like my friends who wouldn't think about ever touching health insurance or life insurance, and I have a lot of those, started saying this is a necessity. Whether it drove a lot of action, I don't think yet. And I don't talk about Policybazaar alone there, because Policybazaar actually benefited. But when I look at the industry growth numbers don't point towards a huge growth in insurance penetration.
Maybe it's too early for that, because people are still dealing with their own.
I think you will have more and more people buying it, because it's now become kind of a necessity, and people understand that.
Yeah. I mean, we all have. I mean, I have people in my families who have gone through issues and had to spend tens of lakhs of rupees on this, uh, and they were not covered. So I have no doubt in my mind that it'll happen. But yeah, how fast are we going to see it? Probably you guys will see it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about insurance. I mean, it's a very key element of anybody's financial planning. What would be your advice? We have a lot of young listeners on our podcast. What would be your advice to them, how they should look at insurance as part of their financial planning?
I think the question people have to ask themselves is, how can they afford to not have insurance? So one guy, I remember my gardener, long time back, came back to me and he said, insurance to amir log lete hain. I said that means insurance is bought by rich people. His wife had just had some disease. I said, how much money did you lose? He told me 26,000 rupees. I said, how much time will it take for you to recover that money? In terms of savings, how many years of savings, how many months of savings is that? He told me about 18 months. I said, if you had a product which took 100 rupees a month from you, this was pre Ayushman Bharat days, and gave you up to 2 lakh rupees of insurance coverage at select hospitals. You don't want to need to go to Medanta because you don't want to go there. In fact, you want to go to the not so. His eyes lit up. He said, "Is that possible?"
Wow.
Right? Because the point is, education is not there. And the reason the education is not there, who will earn anything? Yeah. With my Mali paying 100 rupees a month, which distributor is going to make any money? The distributor, I'll make 10 rupees per month or 20 rupees per month. Is anybody interested in that? In going, picking up his check, explaining to him what product to buy? How is that possible? Nobody's interested. Yes, if he only has savings of the 25,000 rupees, somebody would come to him and say, you put your money in a savings product where he can make 7,000-8,000 rupees of commission. Because that is what is possible. But who's interested in him buying a 100 rupee health insurance policy? 100 rupee per month health insurance policy. Nobody is interested. Yep. And so we have to understand what is the reason rather than getting, hooked on by some major. So I think the first thing young people have to ask, answering your question, is what are the pieces that you cannot afford living without? Right? It's like during the days of COVID, we could not afford going out without a mask. Insurance is like that mask, right? I think people have to ask themselves that question, and what happens if tomorrow I'm not there? How does everything get taken care of? Because there's always that possibility, however small. And well, if somebody believes they are Superman and they're willing to take that risk, that's fine. Like I tell people, I do not have insurance. I do not have insurance. And I tell them very clearly, I don't need it. The reason I don't need it is because I have built enough financial assets, liquid financial assets. There's cash in my bank, which can address these eventualities. If today I disappear, my family is not affected in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, except for the emotional part. Mm-hmm. And that is because whatever I have, my dependence on my salary is so low that it doesn't matter at all. I think that's what people have to understand. That is their salary important to them? If their salary is important to them, because it's a question of assets versus income.
Yep.
If the income coming basis your own labor is a very high part of your family support system, then you cannot afford to live without insurance. I think that is the part that people need to understand. When I'll give you one more example. Most people, when they have a serious health issue, usually their income is also severely impacted within 18 months of that. Whatever the companies say, I have seen it in practice. Unfortunately, I have seen it in practice. Most companies will not retain an impaired employee for too long. We are all in competitive businesses. From a goodwill perspective, 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years. Beyond that, the company will find one excuse or the other to get rid of the individual. That's the reality. Now, how one wants to face it is up to them. Right? And if we believe those events will never happen, fine. That's okay. So I think it's the first item that you cross out in any financial planning. You can live without growth of income. You cannot live without insurance.
Yeah. Let's talk some personal stuff here. I've heard that you personally designed almost all of the Policybazaar ads. Like Ullu Mat Bano, Akshay Kumar's Yamraj role. How do you think about all this? I mean, you just now mentioned about this. Policy insurance is like a mask. Probably we might see an ad coming out like that. But how do you think of all that?
Oh, so see, I am one of the people who's most pained by people not having insurance that I have ever met. And it's not because I run Policybazaar, it's from before I run Policybazaar. It's like, how can you afford to? It's asking almost a reverse question, right? There is an ad we may be working on, which is actually a group of people who say, I will go to hospital, I might even die, but I promise I will never buy insurance. I know it costs less, but I promise I will never buy insurance. But the reality is that's how everybody is. That's how 80% of the country is, right? Now, most agencies do not understand that pain. They want to make it entertaining. They want to make it creative. It's like somebody came to me and said, we will show that there's a jewel, and before you buy a jewel, you compare. So why wouldn't you compare insurance? They don't get the pain as severely as I get it. I can be a creative person in Hindi. I'm not a very creative person in English. So if you're talking to me in English, you won't find me very funny. But if you talk to me in Hindi, you will start to find me quite funny. I think our brains work that way. We naturally, despite being English educated all my life, but let's say the fun element of me only comes out in Hindi. So I guess for building ads for ourselves, you need to feel the pain at a certain level to be able to connect with the consumer, because otherwise the consumer will not get it. He does not want to act on this, and rightly so, because for him, the best case scenario is that he never uses this product. How many advertisers have you ever heard hear it this way, that the best case scenario, how many product categories have you heard of this sort, where the best case scenario is you pay for it and you never use it? That's your best case scenario.
Hardly any.
Yeah. Everything else is worse than that. Everything else is worse than that. Right? So I think it's a very unique category. If I had been in the travel industry, maybe I would have relied more on external influence. But in this industry, it's very difficult to rely on external influence. And so we have to bring that pain point out for the consumer in a very dramatic and funny manner. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do. So, like when we had that lady who asks that tarot reader that, I want to talk to my husband. And that guy comes and tries to do some sweet talk. And she says, are you mad? Where is the insurance policy? And he says, I forgot to buy it. He says, are you crazy? You forgot to buy insurance?
Yeah.
So, what do you expect us to do now? What's the point of the sweet talk now? Because how do you expect me to pay school fees? How do you expect me to do this? Etc., etc. So I think we have to bring that pain point out in a crystal clear manner, and I guess that's what the key is.
Interesting. Probably we should do our next recording in Hindi only, because I also love Hindi. So we'll bring all those funny elements there.
There are a lot of people in the world who want to hear you in English, so that's fine.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you are one of the India's top performing triathlete, and you have completed about 7 Ironmans, and probably should explain what those Ironmans are to our listeners. But what role has fitness played in your life, professionally, personally, and
I think,
what advice?
yeah.
See,
fitness was always something that I was just telling my children yesterday as we were coming back from a swimming pool, that if I didn't have to work at all, pretty much the only thing I would do is running, swimming, and cycling. If I didn't have to, earn for a living or whatever, if I had full freedom. So yeah, I like it. I like those activities. I like them since I was 8 years old. It's not something new to me. But I think the step change in fitness happened about at the start of Policybazaar. And the reason for that is I moved away from my family, because my family was in the UK and I went to India. And you'd be very surprised how much time family actually takes. Because you may work for whatever hours you want to. But if you're an early riser or something of that sort, or your weekends, family does take a huge amount of time. And all that time was suddenly just available to me because I had nothing else to do. Right? You can't come to office before 9:30 and expect to do anything because there will be nobody else there. So, especially in a role like mine, what are you going to do sitting alone? Right? So, especially if you get up at 4:35, what are you going to do for those 5 hours? Right? So I guess that is what led to more hours being spent on those activities. And, then I obviously started taking swimming a little more seriously and, went on to represent India at the World Masters Championship. And triathlon was a discovery for me. 2016, I took part in my first triathlon in India. And I won that triathlon across all age categories, young, old, everyone.
Wow.
And I realized that I had a bit of a, talent there. So I started focusing a little more. Of course, it's a demanding activity from a timing perspective. And as COVID happened, I moved back to my family. And I'm actually finding it hard to focus back on triathlons because you realize the moment the family is there, you realize that time is not so easily available. So yeah, that's the broad story. Yes, I have done the 7-8 Ironmans, and those are fine. And I do have amongst the best timings in the India, from amongst the Indians. But I think that is more just who I was. So it would have happened anyway. Just waiting to be discovered.
Okay. Just want to touch point upon, because you mentioned you were in UK and you moved back to run Policybazaar and to start the whole Policybazaar in 2008-9. How was it moving back and working in India in initial years?
So I had worked in India before. So for me, working in India is very natural. But I had worked at a different level. I wasn't the CEO of a company. I wasn't the founder of a company in India. It's complicated. It's very complicated. I think the government's been doing a lot of stuff to help, but it is still very complicated. And the impression of business people is not a great impression, and we all suffer because of that. So I remember in one of the government inspections, the gentleman was there, and I was telling him again and again, sir, I'm a first generation entrepreneur. And he was saying, no, 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 now you've become a businessman. And the amazing thing was it was actually very wrong of him to be saying that, because the connotation in that word was very wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's wrong, right? Because a country like India does require business people.
Of course, yeah.
How else are you going to? I tell my dad all the time, he's been in the army. I'm from an army family. Everybody in my family except me is in the army or Navy or Air Force, right? If there are no business people, where will the money come to pay all the taxes? And where will we support everything with? How will we support our defense? How will we support our healthcare? How will we support our education? How will we support all those things if there is no income? Labor inspections, this inspection, that inspection. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I believe trust actually is a very national issue, not just with the government. We generally have a trust deficit.
Oh yeah.
Across
I
all,
see a
across.
normal customer email.
Yeah.
The mail always starts with fraud,
Yeah.
big names.
Yes.
And it may be like, okay, your payment went through and the payment wasn't recognized, and it will be recognized in 15, 20 minutes or in 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's not like a scam has happened or a fraud has happened, but we love the words fraud, scam, etc., etc. So I think it's a bit, the narrative needs to change in the country. The narrative needs to be, okay, so I'll tell you what I think the narrative needs to be. If you're going to have growth, you will also have risk.
Yeah.
And yes, a little bit of mess will also happen. And that's fine. Because the most important thing for us right now is growth. We as a country need a lot of employment, lot of growth, lot of things. And everything will not be perfect. If I follow all the rules, rather than worrying about what's going to go wrong, I don't think anything will go wrong. I think it'll actually grow phenomenally. And once we get to a certain scale, we can start putting the controls back in. But I think that's...
Yeah. I've seen that in my earlier, industry. I was working in a bank, right? The whole banking industry has gone through a lot of compliance related, especially US compliance related, over the last couple of years. And I've seen that, innovation trying down, controls becoming stronger. It has its own negative impact. While there's some positive side to it, but the negative sides far outweighs that. So I've seen that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can have a risk-based assessment of things and see where the risk is really increasing fast, and then try and control that area rather than control everything.
Yeah. Yeah. We're coming towards the end of our conversation. So, since our show is called Breaking Investment Stereotypes, not leaving the investment side part out, but any insurance stereotype that you think, need to be broken? Any myth stereotyping there? I'm sure there are tons.
Historically, on the life insurance side, insurance has not been insurance. And I think that's the key, right? So when people talk about claim settlement ratios, what they've been selling is not, technically it is insurance, but it doesn't really insure anybody too much. It's mostly a savings product with some, wrapper benefit. And I think that money is required for infrastructure projects, that money is required for the insurance industry to capitalize itself, etc., etc. But those are not really the consumer's problems.
Yeah.
The consumer should be left free. He pays his taxes. He should be let free to, do what's right with his money.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. This is the last question, and we always ask our guests that what advice you will give to your 20-year-old Yashish Dahiya.
It's a very interesting question. And recently, my children asked me that question: that what advice would you give to yourself when you were coming out of school or college?
I'll tell you, you're lucky that your children are asking that question. My children don't even ask that question. They don't ask for advice. But yeah, please go on.
So I thought for 24 hours before giving them the answer. because there were some easy answers. And I said, don't take advice. There's nothing to give, you know. In fact, if anybody gave me advice who was 50 years old when I was 20, it'll be wrong because you're taking something away from me. You're taking away those experiences from me, which were my own,
Yeah.
which was my learning, which I would have got. Let me go and get that learning for myself rather than be advised by. There are two parts to it, right? One is times will change. And even something as simple as don't limit yourself, think big. Had I known that you can think whatever you want, it would have taken the fun out of thinking. I think it's very important that we live our lives fully and don't have any knowledge of the future, which has arrived before its time. Uh, Besides the normal cliched quotes, because I can tell my kids, right, that look, if you work hard over the next 30 years, you can achieve anything.
Yeah.
Eventually stay good to your friends, uh, stay good to your family, most importantly, because eventually that's what's important. Uh, but that would be stealing away. They have to go and mess up with one friend, and then realize how bad it was.
Yeah.
And they have to limit themselves by thinking small, that, okay, I will get my A star, and then say, oh, that was so easy. Why didn't I think of something else? Or they have to go through their own discipline issues, mess up their discipline, and realize, oh, I did not work hard. So obviously, I did not get the result. The fact that karma comes back and bites you every time you don't work hard. Those are just facts, right? But I think those experiences belong to each individual. I can share my experience, but specifically that question, what would I advise my own 20-year-old self? There's a lot to advise. I would love him to live his life the way he did.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting thought. And Yashish, with that, we come to end of our conversation. Thank you so much. It was a
Thank
very
you.
interesting and nice conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Thanks.